When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
There's a good chance you're dealing with a middleman, like me, when you get your medicines. That's because PBMs and insurers are often the same company. We even own big chain pharmacies and are buying your doctor's office. We decide what medicines you can get, where you get them, and how much you pay. It's a win-win. For me.
When middlemen own it all, you lose. Visit phrma.org/middlemen to learn more. Paid for by Pharma.
Slow Burn Media, Evergreen Podcasts, and Killer Podcasts presents Who Killed, a podcast that provides a voice for the voiceless. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Who Killed. I'm your host, Bill Huffman, and this is a Slow Burn Media, Evergreen Podcast, and Killer Podcast production. This week, we have a very special episode. We have a special guest, and that is Raul from LISK. Also joined by Jesse Pollack. So this will be the conclusion to the conversation that Jesse and I had. And then we had some breaking news in the Gilgo case with the identities of the Toddler Doe and the Jane Doe, or Peaches as she was referred to in the news because of a tattoo that she had. Jesse was kind enough to set this up, and Raul is literally the guy that knows everything about this case and is very factual and sticks to the facts, and it's the kind of person that you want to have on your side reporting on this case. So, strap in. This is an hour-and-a-half long episode. It's a very intense, very good conversation about a lot of the things that have happened within the case, what's happening with the case, and what is going to happen with the case. So again, enjoy this conversation. Thank you to Jesse and Raul for joining me this week on Who Killed. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Who Killed. I'm your host, Bill Huffman, and this is a Slow Burn Media, Evergreen Podcast, and Killer Podcast production. We have been talking about the Long Island serial killer case for, a number of years now, and we've had Jesse Pollack on a number of times. And just recently, we had him on to discuss some of the latest in the case, but just after we had him on, some real big news broke. So this week, I am lucky to have Jesse. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much for having me back, Bill. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us. And we have Raul from LISK. And if you are anybody on social media, you know this guy. He is the guy that is the man behind the facts. So welcome to the show. Give us a little description of how you got involved.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. For me, it started so many years ago. Just relevant to what we'll wind up talking today. I just remember seeing a newspaper clipping in the Daily News of a Peaches tattoo that looked like it had, a bite taken out of it. Fast forward a number of years later, I'm living and working in Long Island, and Shannon Gilbert goes missing, and at some point it crosses my awareness, and all things Gilgo Beach begin to explode, and I've been there as a kid. I've been on Long Island half my life, and I think I just started, gaining an interest in that, learning these girls' life stories, and seeing all of the abusive facts. And for me, it was the abusive facts that I took umbrage with, and I started collecting all of these innuendos and these statements about each of the girls' lives, and even about Gilgo as a complete entity. And then I just started verifying what was true, what was not true. From there, a decade later, there's a map that I have, and a whole advocacy platform, and people that I would have looked up to, a million years ago, that are now in my circle, and I'm very humbled by that. But I think for me, overall, the most humbling thing is twofold: being acknowledged as someone that'll stand for all the girls and the victims, and then someone that's there to support the families and recognized as such by them, and that's truly a humbling thing.
And that's where I met Raul, was, floating through these online social media circles discussing the case, and he really stood out to me as, this is a guy that not only knows his facts, but he is not using them as ammunition to sensationalize the story or make it all about himself. He had gained the trust of several of the victims' families, and very quickly I recognized him as someone who is not just a good sounding board for like, hey, well, what do you think about this rumor or this innuendo or this report that's kind of coming out of Suffolk or Nassau County, depending on which case we're talking about. He was just someone that was trustworthy. There's such a weird landscape out there, like we've talked about many times, Bill, where true crime has just become like this, and I might be kind of a hypocrite for saying this, but like, it's like a weird pet hobby for a lot of people, and there are a lot of bad actors out there. So I guess what I'm trying to say is Raul is not one of them. So it's always great to have someone you can talk to and sound off with in that community like that.
Yeah, honestly, when I'm on social and I see, posts from Catch LISK, it's facts. And again, like we've talked about in previous episodes, Jesse, it's not to capitalize on them at all. This is about finding answers. And I think you having the access to Raul, and we are so lucky to have him on the show to discuss the latest updates. It's incredible how, a matter of circumstance leads you into the position that you're currently in, where you're working in a circle of people that you've long respected and probably I've never thought you'd be there, but you are. And now you are like the main source for the accurate information coming out of Gilgo, or coming out of Long Island, in regards to this case.
That's very true. And it's something that, when I started, one of my first documents I ever started was that falsehood and fact column on some cheesy Excel sheet. I'd be embarrassed by it now, but then once you have that ability to say that's not true, and here's the truth, but here's the proof and a link to substantiate it, you just watch people fall to the sidelines, and the crazy theories go away, or they just take them away from me because I can refute that. But it's an honor for me to have other podcasters live in the moment text me personally and say, hey, is this a fact? What's the date for this? Or do I have this right? And, I don't look for credit for that. I say it now, in the context of our conversation, but the honor for me is to make sure someone else is repeating the fact. And then we can move away from all the falsehoods that had a life of their own in all things Gilgo.
And a very, very strong life, too. I mean, yep. I think I speak for all three of us when I say we're not immune to having, I don't know if fallen prey is the right word, because I don't think necessarily every falsehood was like some sort of conspiratorial aspect. But I mean, a good example would be, 6-7 years ago, yeah, I would have been right on the front lines with a lot of other people saying, hey, Burke might be behind all of these. But I think the difference between the three of us and a lot of other people out there is the second it became clear that, no, yeah, Burke, he's a piece of shit, but he's not the Long Island serial killer. We accept that. We own our mistakes and engaging in potential falsehoods, and we move on, because, as Raul says, the most important thing in a constantly moving and constantly evolving story like this with many different threads and branches is the accurate collection of facts, a clearinghouse, if you will, because you put all the facts in one spot, eventually something is going to shake loose that's going to lead to a break in the case.
Yeah, and or it's perpetuating, conversely, perpetuating something ridiculous. Like, there was just something that came across my Facebook feed recently that Toddler, now we know as Tatiana, had died from blunt force trauma, and that was never out there. That was just a group of people putting out, a hypothesis, and it's on Tatiana's Namus page, that no signs of trauma. So you gotta let stuff like that go, because it just feeds a conspiratorial beast that's totally non-existent. And it's things like that I get offended with personally, and it can be construed as irrational, but I get offended with someone fucking with the honor of a deceased person. Now, I don't know how Tatiana died. We don't know the answer to that. It's safe to assume she was murdered, but even I go that far as to state that there is, no cause of death, and we don't know how she died. So, it could be construed as splitting hairs, but we don't know the answer yet, and even with Peaches, people saying she died by decapitation. Well, no, that's not exactly true.
The elements play a lot of roles in how the bodies are discovered, especially when they're out there for so long.
But I think before we get too deep into the weeds here, for some of our listeners here, Raul, could you give a good breakdown of, the beginnings of the whole saga of Tanya and Tatiana, how they were discovered, when the positioning of their remains, and what led us up to last week's revelations?
On June 28th, 1997, and here's the fact, not what else is being put out there even right now, a man fishing or going fishing with his son notices a foul smell, goes and looks and sees a green tub near McDonald Pond in Hempstead Lake State Park. He goes to investigate it. There's a plastic bag on the top. He opens up the bag and immediately sees what looks like a human body in there, or parts thereof. Law enforcement shows up. It is determined that it's a torso of an African-American female with a peach tattoo on her left breast. The peach tattoo is unique insofar as it had like a bite taken out of it. And she was soon to be known as Peaches Jane Doe. Fast forward to April of 2011. Yes, I'm sorry, my head is so befuddled. During the search along Ocean Parkway for Shannon Gilbert, the remains of 10 more bodies are found. They turn out to be Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Barthélemy, Megan Waterman, Amberlynn Costello, partial remains of Valerie Mack, partial remains of Jessica Taylor, an Asian doe, and a toddler. Also found on in that same time period further west was the skull of Karen Vergata, formerly known as Fire Island Jane Doe, but also in a bag near about a mile away from the Jones Beach Needle was a bag containing the extremities, arms and legs. Those arms and legs turned out to be part of the torso found in Hempstead Lake Park in '97, belonging to Peaches. A few years later, in 2015, 2016, Peaches and the toddler are determined to be mother and child. And then a universe of sorts is created, all things Gilgo and serial killers, serial killer. And then we fast forward to 2020. I'm just going to shortcut it. Then we get to the arrest of Rex Heuermann, the accused Long Island serial killer, charged with 7 of the 10 so far. And then something super exciting happened last week, and that was an announcement, in my opinion, the long-awaited announcement from Nassau County related to Peaches and Toddler. And what we had hoped would be an identification. And then that Wednesday morning, it was announced that Peaches and Toddler Jane Does were Tanya Denise Jackson and Tatiana Marie Dykes. And the phrase of Peaches and Toddler could now be replaced by their true names. And it was very moving to learn their names, to see their faces, and to know a bit of their background. So in a case that, went from 0 to negative in no time, in the last several years, we've gone into almost hyperspace of information, of identifications, of hope, of charges, and court proceedings now. So for someone like me, and even someone like me who came in, I would say middle of this, I wasn't a part of this from the beginning. I watched, I learned, I took notes, I took facts. But on behalf of all those that came before me, I know it's a blessing. And I do talk with a lot of those people that came before me. So where we're at right now is something uniquely special and contemporary. There are people that were there for, Son of Sam or BTK or Golden State. This is contemporaneous to me and people like Jesse and so many others. And it's rare to not only be in a position of knowledge, it's even more rare to be in a position of trust and to have the responsibility of maintaining the integrity and the legacies of the victims and standing for their families against anyone that attempts to come at them in any negative way. And I'm sorry I'm long-winded.
No, you're fine. You should hear me on these. Well, you have heard me on these shows, so you know. But and another hurdle that came with the whole process of identification is we now know that Tanya and Tatiana were never reported missing by their families. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I think when I started my map 2.5 years ago, I was shocked at stuff like that, and you just aren't shocked by it anymore. And it's more than just the map. It's people that and families that I've worked with that are outside of Gilgo, have nothing to do with Gilgo for the most part, where it's a 42-year-old missing person case, and they've tried to report it. It just would not go past a sergeant's desk or an officer's notepad or a detective's whatever calendar. It just goes in a
Oh yeah, the common thing of, we see runaways like this all the time.
Right.
They'll be back in a couple days. They're an adult. They have the right to go missing. Lazy police work, unfortunately.
and it is, and I can't give them such a free pass. I do acknowledge that the late 80s and 90s were, short-staffed, untrained, rife with corruption and drugs and the easy way out, but a life is a life, and if you don't take some lost 16-year-old girl or boy seriously, then you don't belong with a badge, and you just you don't, and fuck you. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
I want to be nice to cops, and I know, and in my experience now, that there are many caring law enforcement officers. I just don't see them as frequently as we ought to see them.
We're just not seeing them put in charge of these higher profile investigations. And I mean, as someone who's been working as a true crime investigative journalist for, coming up on 15 years now, I have sat with more than my share of retired cops and detectives who have told me, like, oh yeah, nothing seemed strange when this came in. The family just said, they left one night. And so we just figured it was just another teenage runaway. And I always have to bite my tongue, because I really want to say, yeah, okay, so what did you think when you were standing over their bones a few weeks later? What did you think about telling them that?
Right.
It's like, yeah, I understand that the 80s and the 90s, there was short staffing and there wasn't, the right amount of training that we see now. But I mean, come on, how many decades in were we to, case after case of, we just thought they were a runaway and then, we found their head in a river.
Yeah.
So it's like they know better. At some point we cross the line from, oh, well, these cops, things like this just don't happen out there, in these nice little suburb bedroom communities of the major metropolitan area. They're used to writing parking tickets. It's like, use your common sense. It's like, and on Long Island, there really is no excuse for this. I mean, the Suffolk County Police Department alone has a multi-billion-dollar budget, and that is not an exaggeration. It is in the multi-billions of dollars. There are nice communities on Long Island, but they're not immune from major violent crime.
That's absolutely right. Nobody's immune from it. It's just a terrible thing out there, and at some point someone's got to stand up and fight, and it's a system that you're going to have to fight. It's a mountain, but it doesn't make it immovable. I think at the end of the day with Gilgo, when there's a conviction, even if there's multiple convictions, someone's going to have to literally verbally acknowledge the fuck-ups of Suffolk County, 10, 15 years ago, even longer than that, but related to Gilgo. They're going to have to stand up and admit it. And I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever to see Burke on a stand talking about how he basically stonewalled the investigation to protect his own ass. Whether that happens on the defense or the prosecution side remains to be seen, but we'll see.
And last week's press conference was very frustrating for me because I saw it as taking a step backwards in that same direction. Now we're finally starting to see some real good, honest work coming out of Suffolk County. And now we've got Nassau County giving press conferences saying, well, we don't know if this is tied into the Gilgo killings, the LISK case. It's like, all right, come on. Like, it was easy enough to entertain that, okay, well, there's a possibility that this could be two killers using the same dumping ground back before we got all of these other identifications and the evidence coming out of the Huerman residence. We now know that the bulk of those bodies can be tied to one killer, Rex Huerman, through DNA evidence and computer forensic analysis. And now we're backpedaling and saying, well, we don't know if Tanya and Tatiana were killed by, it's like, come on. Like, yeah, I know you can't definitively say yet that they were, but are we really gonna, backpedal here and be like, well, let's not jump to conclusions. It's like, come on. It's the same exact MO as all of the other dismembered victims. You know, you've got some, you know, further in on the island, and then you have the rest of the pieces along Gilgo Parkway, same stretch, same side of the parkway. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Tatiana's body was found pretty close to Valerie Mack's remains, right?
Yeah, Tatiana was about 250 feet away from Val. On the far,
it's like, come on, that's not a coincidence.
No, it's not. It's not. And I think as far as press conferences go, this was something I keyed into the day Rex was arrested. That, I mean, it's politics, man. Like, no matter how forward we move in society on Long Island, it's the same bullshit, man. Because you look at the 23rd, when the day Rex was arrested, and there's a multitude of press conferences happening. Rodney Harrison with Steve Ballone, followed by Rodney Harrison with Ray Tierney, no Steve Ballone, followed by 2 days later, the state police. So in a way, it's a political football of ownership of, you know, credit for it, instead of one organized, unified press conference. Somebody nuanced like me saw through that right from the start. I'm like, this is fucked. This is completely fucked from jump, because, you know, they all can't be on the same side of this right now. You created a task force. It has multi-agency participants in it. So then just talk about it and be proud of it, instead of splintering off into so many things. And Nassau County was never going to be happy with this. They were a part of the initial presentation, press conference, you know, with the victims' families there that day, but they haven't been a part of it. They don't want to give up control of Peaches to Suffolk County. So this whole thing was a farce. And we're learning that the FBI identified Tanya a couple of years ago. Okay, then even a year or so to build a case or what have you. Was that information about Tanya being shared with Suffolk County? Who's ever going to know until the end of it all? But the politics of all of this is shitty. So NASA's going to make an attempt to say, you know, it could be LISK, but, you know, we're not excluding that it's not. And, you know, we're looking at things like this. If you notice, they even dropped the domestic violence phrase in that call. And I thought that was kind of revealing and in a way disappointing, because there's only ever been two real three if you're crazy. 3 real theories with Tanya. You know, it's either LISK, domestic violence, or a random one-off, which I hate, you know, dumbing it down like that and sounding cold. But she just accidentally meets her fate. Her and her daughter meet their fate.
A domestic or a random that just so happens to be the exact same MO of the most prolific serial killer in Long Island history. Yeah, what a coinky dink.
You're right. And I mean, since the night of her announcement, I've been all kinds of deep into all things Tanya. And could you go down an avenue of DV? I'm still going down it. I'm going down it deep so that I can possibly, in my mind, and I'm not an investigator, I'm an idiot, I'm a nobody, but I can exclude that and still feel confident. Like, several things can be true at once. And I think in a case labeled Gilgo that is chock full of coincidences, Tanya might also be just another inexplicable series of coincidences that ultimately lead her, you know, in the clutches of a serial killer.
Well, yeah, and I could see that being a possibility, you know, a remote possibility, because we also have the outlier case of Shannon. Now, I will acknowledge that, yeah, if Shannon was not killed by Rex, and it's looking more and more like she wasn't, that is a really bizarre coincidence that she had the same profession as the other victims, and she's found very close to that side of the highway. But there are other outliers there that we can kind of rule her out with. It's like, yeah, her body was found near that side of the highway, but it wasn't wrapped in burlap. She also wasn't dismembered like the earlier victims. There was nothing taped over her mouth like we saw in some of the Gilgo 4. And that's why I think that investigating possible, for lack of a better term, domestic should still be on the table there, more than, oh, well, she accidentally somehow simultaneously drowned and froze to death on a 53-degree day in a third of an inch of water. It's like, well, we know that the police made it to Oak Beach within 15, 16 minutes of her 911 call ending. And that is pretty much enough to rule out Brewer. Like the responding officer would have seen Brewer running between the marsh and his house. So we know Brewer didn't do it, but we know there was one other person there, Michael Pack, who has told provable lie after provable lie about his, actions that morning. And it became stone cold fact once the 911 call became public. And it's like, okay, well, now that this is all out there and we know he was lying about what he was doing that morning, why isn't he being reinvestigated for what happened to Shannon? Because, the doctor, look, the Dr. Hackett thing is weird, but he's a weird guy. Does that make him a killer? No. But I'm sorry, John Ray and all these other people, they have not dug up anything concrete to point, towards him killing Shannon. So if we're ruling him out, all that leaves us with is Pack. So I know we're kind of, getting off the beaten trail here, but I think it is indicative of, okay, well, things need to be ruled out step by step in order to reach a logical conclusion. And we're just not seeing it in many of these cases. Now, again, good work is coming out of Suffolk for the Gilgo 4 and the identification of the remaining victims, but it's still like, okay, well, where's the additional information on Shannon? Where's the additional information on Tanya and Tatiana? I mean, you guys had an ID for 2 years. You figure, okay, well, we're holding out on this other lead to pan out so we have more information at the press conference. And I hate to sound jaded, but it's like that press conference was kind of a nothing burger. There was no family there. I mean, I think all three of us can safely say it was a little bit of an eye-opener that not even Tierney was there. Oh, yeah. It's like, okay, well, what is the point of holding this conference? Like, yes, it's important that her name is out there, but where's the information? Like, these cops love holding these press conferences to pat each other on the back and say, we need the public's help. It's okay, well, you need to give the public something to go on. There was almost no background information on Tanya and Tatiana. It's like, what do we have to go with? I mean, we had more information about them before they were identified through that tattoo artist that they spoke with in 2015 or something like that. And granted, he may have misremembered some details. Like I believe he said that the woman that he tattooed said she was from the Bronx. We now know that Tanya was living in Brooklyn at the time, but hey, it's the first 3 letters. It's an easy mix up. So I guess what I'm trying to get at here is these cops love trying to make these appeals to the public and saying, we need your help on this, but it's all politics, like you were saying. It's like, we need your help, but we're not going to give you the tools you need for it.
Well, it's not our business, they'll basically tell you. I mean, I developed so much on Tanya's life by the end of the day of that announcement. I mean, I certainly had a little bit of a head start, but I was able to, I probably know as much as the cops know right now, and that's being facetious, I know, but there isn't anything about Tanya. There's stuff I know about Tanya that no one else seemed to have picked up on yet, and I'm like, well, why not? So, there's a case so far to look at for, some sort of type of domestic violence, and I'm not accusing the baby's father at all. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because I'm a little cloudy in my brain. But, I think what the cops gave us was nice to just get a face and some background info. But All I needed was her first name, and I found her in 15 minutes.
Well, yeah, and I mean, cut this out if I'm blowing up your spot here, because I do not want to do this. But I mean, you had mentioned first names to me, and I found them within 30 seconds, because it's like, okay, well, let's go to Find a Grave and find a Tanya and Tatiana that are linked. And sure enough, there they are. And it turns out, you know, again, I don't want to criticize too much from the sidelines here, but it's like, you know, they had a burial ceremony for the two of them over a year ago, I think.
No, that was...
Oh, it was recent?
Yeah, it was recent. It was literally last month.
Wow.
Yeah, they were only interred last month.
So were their remains, for lack of a better term, in storage at the medical examiner's office this whole time?
Correct. Well, at least Peaches with OCME or Nassau County. Suffolk had Tatiana. They must have given her up, and probably not happy about it.
Well, I mean, you know, I guess it's kind of a blessing that they did have those resources at their disposal, especially with Tanya being killed all the way back in the 90s. You know, that was still the era of, oh, it's been a couple years, there's no identification. Okay, dump them off on Hart Island. Yeah. And then recovery becomes impossible after about a year, because I'm sure you know this, Raul, but Bill, I don't know if you know about this. On Hart Island, they stack them 5-6 deep in cheap pine coffins and no burial vault. So, you know, after a year of rainfall and on a coastal, you know, portion of the United States, those caskets collapse, the remains become intermingled, they become impossible to recover at that point. So if that had happened to Tanya, and we meaning society had identified her within the last 2 years, this would not have been a situation where they could have gone out to Hart Island and easily recovered her to inter her with her daughter in the military cemetery she's in now.
That's crazy.
Yeah, Hart Island is already below sea level standing on it. So you drill down, you dig 100 feet deep, you're underwater. And you can't, there's no wall there to prevent the water from coming in. It's just going to continue to happen. And it's hard. And, you know, there's a lot of historical information there that is literally being lost by the moment. Because just to Jesse's point, they all get commingled. And once anything gets commingled, lawyers are gonna fight it out, saying it's tainted evidence. It shouldn't be admitted into court. So,
which is a valid point. I mean, how many times have we seen UID cases in the past where it's like, oh yeah, oops, we kind of got the wrong body part here. I mean, we saw it. We're at the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing right now, and something that a lot of people don't know about is there was an unidentified leg that was recovered from the blast zone at the Murrah building. And that led to all these conspiracy theories about John Doe number 2, you know, Timothy McVeigh's supposed co-conspirator that day. And it turned out that, oh no, we did some faulty testing or cataloging or something, and it was a woman's leg. It had nothing to do with McVeigh. So we see this time and time again. And of course, yeah, that comes with advancements in DNA technology, but also sometimes it's just a clerical error, or oops, we dumped them in a pauper's field and the bones got mixed up.
Yeah. I think with Tanya, it was so important, though, to maintain the chain of custody on her, because of, in that green bin, one were the plastic bag that everything was in, the bedding, and the pillowcase, like knowing that she was, you know, most likely discovered within 3 days of her murder, there had to be DNA. Like, what better magnet for DNA is a blanket
and fibers too?
Yeah, bedding and a blanket. So, and then with Tatiana all the way out there, it was always told to us that she was, you know, swaddled, if you will, in a blanket. So again, you know, LISK seems to have trouble with hair and keeping it off of people. So, like,
Well, that's what makes me wonder if Nassau, and I hate to make an accusation like this, but this needs to be asked. It makes me wonder if Nassau is somehow stonewalling Suffolk from doing that wet vac DNA technique on those blankets and comforters, because it's like, okay, well, we've had Huerman in custody with DNA samples from him and his entire family for well over a year now. It should be pretty easy to check that evidence to see if, one of his hairs or his wife or his daughter's hairs are on something that Tanya and Tatiana were wrapped in. Why is that testing not being done? That should be a department-wide priority where the results would have come back very soon, and we're not seeing any hint of that right now.
Well, now you're back in the politic ring now, because if Rex is a Suffolk County POI, Nassau would probably have to sue Suffolk to get Rex's DNA. Rex's DNA won't go into the system until he's convicted, so everybody's got to wait. The thing that...
So they can't share, you're talking about a task force that Suffolk and Nassau are both in. They can't share evidence on a POI that's in custody? Is there a legal hurdle there?
Well, yes, because he's entitled to that privacy. Now, I've been told, and I haven't been able to verify it in any way because the internet is ambiguous at best, that in New York, it would have to be considered a close case. So I don't know what the parameters are for close case, because it would seem to me that Peaches and Toddler and everybody in between would be considered a close case, even though it's from 97 to 2010 or 2011. Like, to me, that's a close case because of all the nuances of it. Ocean Parkway, and you have dismemberment, you have intact, you have burlap and binding. So I don't know what and who determines what's close or not. Now, we know Vegas wanted Rex's DNA. Suffolk pushed back. Vegas sued for it, and Vegas now has Rex's DNA. I don't know what part of an agreement's happening where they're not going to announce any of their findings publicly until Tierney gets his conviction. I don't want to go down that road too much of speculating, but Peaches, in my opinion, should be a close case. And if Nassau or Suffolk have not shared this information, then they both suck as much as they are both great. But they suck more for not doing this. Like, there has to be DNA on bedding and blankets, for Christ's sake. That shit should have been tested at the same time. Literally at the same time. Because we know we're going back from 1996. They're testing everybody on Gilgore. Everybody's being tested, from Karen Vergata in 96 to Tanya and Tatiana, to Val and Jess and Valerie Sandra Castilla. Like, all the evidence is being tested. Now, all of them except for Peaches is Suffolk County.
This is just, it's unfucking believable. And like, I get it, the whole interjurisdictional politics of all of it. But if it all leads to a conviction is a big enough cake for everyone to get a fucking slice of and claim victory. I'm sorry, like, if they caught the Zodiac killer tomorrow, you wouldn't have people walking around going, oh yeah, well, that's a Vallejo victory. No, it's a San Francisco victory. Well, actually, it's a Salinas victory. It's like, no, it's the cops got him.
Yeah.
It's like, get the fuck over yourselves and do your fucking job that our taxes pay for.
Well, I'll remind you of something I said a few minutes ago. 4 press conferences for the arrest of LISK. 4. In a matter of 3 days. So politics, you can't get away from it. And somebody's always going to want to shine a little bit brighter than somebody else. And at first it was Harrison running the first 2 press conferences. Harrison is gone, and then it's all Tierney. Now, I love Tierney. I think he's doing an incredible job, not only on
phenomenal work,
not only on Gilgo, but everything else in Suffolk County. I admire the guy. He's got charisma. He exudes confidence and knowledge and authority in the courtroom.
And he seems to genuinely care. He's a guy that you watch all these interviews with. It's like, this is a man who is emotionally invested in these cases, not just because it's his job, but he cares.
And I believe that. But the powers that be have a structure in place that, you got to play ball sometimes. And egos come into this, to some degree as well. And I think, from Rodney Harrison's position, he tried to balance those egos. He was the lead law enforcement officer at that time. Just the way Suffolk County is built up, the police commissioner is never in charge for too long before a powerful DA comes in, and that's what happened here. So, and I'm not blaming either of them because I think they were both fantastic in their own right, but
no, it's just the beast.
It's just the beast. That's literally it. It's the political beast. And despite people at the first two press conferences thanking all of the affiliated agencies, you still had the state police do a separate press conference saying how it was one of our people that identified the connection and named the suspect. All right, so we're all dick measuring here. For what? Like, the families don't give a shit. At the very end of their list, that's what they care about. But their list is all about their girls, their justice, and ensuring a conviction. Whoever gets the title and the pat on the back, go ahead, whatever. But that's not what they're about right now. They're about justice.
Yeah, I mean, I look at all the press conferences. I look at the politics at play. I mean, you have to look at the fact that Burke played a role in stonewalling the investigation to prevent his dirty little secrets from coming out. It was a CYA, covering his ass, and basically I think that's what initially drove this into such a holding pattern for a number of years, where it just felt like it was just a circle of getting running around in circles.
The only thing that it wasn't holding, I mean, it was at the same time, it was an incubator for conspiracy theories.
Oh, for sure.
And they just, you take the oxygen out of that and they just thrived. And
I'll be the first to say that I bought into them. I mean, for years, I was like, LISK is a cop. That's the only way that this guy is getting away with all of this. He's on the inside. And no, it's the people that were on the inside were causing such a clusterfuck that it allowed a monster to run free for at least 30 years.
And it's the people like us that have an open mind, that can keep an open mind, that you're not going to die on a hill of a theory when, this isn't your loved one that you're playing theories with. This isn't, a game to win like a pawn on a chessboard. The ability to let go of a long believed theory and adapt to what's presented to you is just intelligence. Anybody that fails to do that is just unintelligent, in my opinion. And I try to be ethical, but sometimes you just got to call an asshole, and it's like you're not letting go. I had hoped that the arrest would eliminate all of this nonsense, and yet I still am out there every once in a while. I don't bother with it too much anymore because it's too much, but it's like Rex and Burke knew each other. Well, if you could fucking prove that to me, then please do it, but otherwise shut up with that already. Like, there is no proof of that whatsoever. And it's infuriating because it's a distraction. And now you got Macedonio, doubling down on Michael Brown's, saying how they want to know everybody that, Suffolk County looked into as a suspect. All you're doing is delaying justice, my friend. You're not even my friend. You're just delaying justice, Brown. And for your idiot clown Macedonio to be doing that too is just as infuriating to me, because these victims deserve their justice, and just own it already and move on. Do your due diligence, because you don't want to have anything go out on appeal. But, if Brown, you're doing it, that makes sense. You're the guy's lawyer, fine. But to have Macedonios out there saying that nonsense is just infuriating to me.
No, they're just stalling for time. It's like Bill and I talked about in the last episode. They've got Rex dead to rights, and they have nothing to leverage him with to get easy confessions out of him and conclusions. You know, the death penalty is not on the table out there, so they can't threaten him by saying, well, listen, if you don't talk, we're going for, you know, death row on this. You know, he knows he's going to spend the rest of his life in jail. You know, what are they going to offer him? They're going to, we'll get you more commissary money for snacks if you confess to peaches. So it's just like, you know, if I was Rex's lawyer, I'd be like, well, they're going to convict him anyway, so we might as well keep stalling and keep generating our hourly fee. And it's, again, it's the nature of the legal beast. It's, I get why they're doing it, but it doesn't make it right. It's like, come on, let's you know, forget this fucking game. Let's get this to fucking trial. Let's get the truth out there. Let's get the conviction underway, and then get back to work on closing the rest of these cases.
Yeah, I mean, the delay the last couple of weeks has been because the judge had a bench trial already scheduled. So we go back on June 17th, where the defense begins to call their, I'm told, 2 expert witnesses, which I have great anticipation the people's lawyer, Santo Martino, will absolutely eviscerate the whoever Brown puts on the stand. Just the quality and level of skill set and knowledge on the prosecution's team is leaps and bounds ahead of anything.
Was that who was tearing Rex's lawyer a new asshole in that one article that you posted when he was trying to say that this sort of DNA technology should not be admissible in court because there's only one legal precedent for it?
Well, all you need is one legal precedent, right? But everything has a starting point at some point, you know? Like fingerprints. Until they canvassed thousands of fingerprints to make sure that they were all uniquely different, it was the same thing. Like everything has its origin point.
And that's what a judge is for.
Exactly.
A judge is there to rule if it's admissible in court.
Exactly. And what I found, because I've been there for all but one, I found that the scientists that are put up there, they're not speaking to people like me or anybody in the gallery. They in a way, I hate saying dummy down, but they make it digestible information that anybody with a qualified brain cell could understand what they're trying to communicate. And
I dealt with that in the newsroom as a newspaper journalist. It was like, okay, listen, the average American has a 6th grade reading level. You have to make it digestible, as you said, so the average American can understand even the most complicated of facts that you're putting down there. And like you said, we're very lucky that these technicians that are called as expert witnesses, most of them have a lot of trials under their belt already, so they know how to present this very new and very complicated and groundbreaking DNA technology in a way that the jury and people reading the press reports can understand it. And we're already seeing little tastes of this at the press conferences, even though we just spent like the last hour shitting on them a bit. But I do appreciate it that they are making sure that in the public information that goes out there, that they are putting a fine point under this DNA sample is eliminated to like, you know, 0.00001% of the American population, meaning there isn't a gnat's, you know, hair chance in hell that this is someone else's DNA.
And they can identify a gnat's hair, too.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I think I find the Fry hearings fascinating for the science of it all. I also found it very interesting watching the judge as he absorbs this information. I think for the second witness, Dr. Navratsky, he actually, for Dr. Green himself, he started asking questions right off the bat, like the judge himself. So, and that was at a point where I was starting to get glassy-eyed, because even, you know, I don't consider myself the brightest person on the planet, but I am by far not the dumbest. And it was hard for me to continue listening to this monotone, big word kind of stuff, and the judge asking the question snapped me right out of it. So the judge is absolutely on his job, and he's on point. So I have great confidence in this. I I have a document that I share publicly out there on all things with this trial. Every document that is involved in this is on there, including bios of everybody that's been testifying so far, like on Estrella, on Dr. Harris, Green, and Narotsky. I'll have the defense's 2 people. They're already up there, but I don't bother to learn their names yet. But the point is in a way, it's a sort of coming full circle where I started in this, which was collecting information and making it, open source. Now I'm at this level, doing it even, more profoundly regarding this case. And I think it's important that people have the ability to draw their own conclusions by reading whatever available information is out there. And I ain't putting out there publications, that are in Moldavia on this case. Like, it's got to be relevant to some degree. And I do have faith in Newsday and the reporting coming out of there. But if I see something good coming out of another publication, I'll put it out there too, or I'll put it in that document. I just want people to understand and read. And, with Newsday, it's behind a paywall, so I've copied all of that and put it on its own document on that too. So if you have a Newsday link, you just open that up. If you don't, open up the Google Doc where I just copied and pasted the article into it. So again,
and Newsday's got some good people working on this too, because I remember when Hart gave her press conference about the belt, and I looked in the metadata of the photo and I saw that it had Maureen's name on there. I called up one of my guys at Newsday and I was like, "Are you guys aware of this yet? Because this is a big fuck up." And they were like, "Yeah, we've been on it all afternoon," and they will not comment on it. So, knowing that they're ahead of the nerds on this is good from a press standpoint.
It is, and it's important. I mean, Suffolk County is not, and no agency is, impervious to fucking up. Suffolk's got a bit of an advantage on everybody because they've done it, at incredible depths. Look at Sugar Bear on the website for reference. But they also did it more recently when Tierney announced the cold case squad, and they put which one was it? Sayreville Jane Doe on there. The title of the metadata had a Korean name on that. So I was in a rabbit hole for like 2 hours trying to figure out if this was the name of the unidentified. And if it is, why are they fucking around with us in the first place, putting composites out there when you know who they are? Just give us their names. And it was weird on that. So no one caught that. I brought that to a contact at Newsday. They went to the DA, and the DA was like, "Oh shit, we don't know anything about it, but we'll get right back on it and get back to you." And it turned out it was just some weird glitch. But man, I don't know. I still don't know. But they're just, you gotta be like, facts matter, and you gotta double check. And I'm being a hypocrite because I screw up all the time. If I misstate something, I'll correct it. But what can you do? I just think at that level, like, you gotta have a person to double check everything, like everything. Like,
now, when you mentioned, okay, I had misheard you. I thought you said Sayreville, not Sayville, and I'm like, wait a minute, Sayreville, New Jersey? I'm from there. I was like, there's a connection there.
No, it was the Long Island.
Okay, yeah, Sayville, gotcha. Yeah. But yeah, no, the interesting thing too there is, again, we're talking about a department with billions of dollars at their disposal, and it's very striking. Like, everybody knows about metadata. Well, most people. But it's like, really, with that kind of budget, you guys don't have a tech staff that's like inventorying your data, that, you don't have one nerd sitting in a cubicle going, "Yeah, by the way, that one that's going out for public release, make sure you don't have the decedent's name attached to the metadata on the JPEG you're putting in the press release."
I mean, if you don't have somebody doing that, like, put me in, coach, like, I can help out.
It's like, I've watched all those CSI shows, and it's like, God, what happened to those guys, But to have a multi-billion-dollar budget and to be unable to reel those kind of mistakes in is definitely a sign of ineptitude. And I don't know if it's having too much money at your disposal or too many cooks in the kitchen, but it certainly seems like they kind of get over their skis.
Well, to give him a way out and shit on him at the same time is most of that money is going to overtime from the years before.
Yeah.
So
touche.
they're just robbing Peter to pay Paul at this point.
Fair point.
Well, I think something that we really should do, especially before we close this conversation out, is, we've talked about all this interjurisdictional drama and bringing the press into it and forensics and everything else into it. But you had mentioned earlier that you have done a lot of research into the lives of Tanya and Tatiana. What I want to ask you here, with whatever depth or brevity that you're comfortable going into, what do we know about the both of them at this moment?
So, and I don't think I have a problem saying this because I've seen it out there only once before. This is way after I had it. So, Tanya was in the U.S. Army. She served in the Gulf. She was also stationed in San Antonio, Missouri, and in Georgia. She is only in the Army from, let's see if I remember, July of 93 through February of 95. We know that Tatiana's born March 17th, 1995. So Tanya gets pregnant in 94. And the baby's father, also in Texas, was married. So Tanya next appears after those three excursions, in the South, on 54th Street in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. So Nassau County said that she was last there. I don't know if that was the last. I think that might have been the first, although I'm open to it going back and forth. She has P.O. box addresses in Brooklyn, and people get...
And there's a lot of data there. When you and I, before the announcement was made, when we were doing a research with our leads that we had, I found a lot of address data for her that had been moved from, this is the mid-90s. This is pre-internet databases with this sort of thing. So someone was taking paperwork and putting them on these online databases. I found about half a dozen different addresses for her, in addition to her Find a Grave listings. And yeah, she's moving around a lot in those final years.
I think the one address that stands out to me most is 312 Sterling Circle, I think it is. The one in Fort Hamilton, Brooklyn. Fort Hamilton, Brooklyn is the VA hospital.
Oh.
It's right by the Verrazano. It's the big white building on the Brooklyn side. And there are, I don't know the right terminology for this, but Army housing?
Sure. Yeah.
So one of the things, so this is where I'm at right now in my fever befuddled brain, is that I believe Tanya, and I hate speculating, but I'm going to do it anyway. I believe Tanya first went to Brooklyn to the 54th Street address. The 312 Sterling address down in Fort Hamilton is connected to the baby's father and his wife. That woman she has property. She has another place in Brooklyn that she winds up giving to her son and daughter-in-law. So here's where irresponsible speculation will happen, and I won't go any further, but if Tanya links to the 312 address owned by Andrew, Tatiana's father's wife, I mean, ... kind of thing. Why is Tanya getting her address there? Now, the other thing is, what the Army does often for people that are discharged honorably, because we were told she had an honorable discharge, they can get them, grants for housing, for medical and everything. That's what I believe the 312 was, but the 312 was never under Tanya's name. The 312 was under Joyce's name. So I think Tanya was there near the end of her life, and that's pure speculation on my part. But it's not irresponsible to think that. I don't know if, she met domestic violence at the hand of somebody in that family, or because she couldn't maintain the 54th Street address apartment, that, much in the way of Sandra Castilla, where Tanya's leaving Tatiana to babysat to go to work, that there is no real job other than survival work. But that's if it's any remote survival work, then she's a LISK victim unequivocally.
Yeah, because that's the one thing that was not touched upon in the press conference. She was never referred to as a sex worker, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, because they want to separate Tanya from Suffolk County. And I just, I just want to right the wrongs. So if Rex is guilty for Tanya and Tatiana, then I fucking want him charged and held accountable for it. And I don't give a shit about the broken pride of Nassau County. At some point, if Suffolk County can really say that they think he's good for Tanya, and we want that DNA evidence, and maybe they don't have it, then they can in turn sue Nassau County for Tanya's evidence on file. I mean, getting into the weeds on that, but at the end of the day, stop fucking around. And if there's DNA, get it tested. And if you can get a conviction, then put it on him. Because these girls, these women, this Asian doe, like, these people deserve justice. And, you can't keep fucking with their legacies. Not while I'm, living and breathing.
Well,
do we have any anecdotal evidence that, because I know, like, in the age of social media and stuff like that, you can, see people that sort of come out of the weeds, whether it's through Reddit or Facebook comments or anything like that. Has anyone surfaced so far that is saying anything hinting towards she may have been doing survival work at that point? Because that is the one thing where we know, for better or worse, that she would have had a possibility of encountering Rex.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with no. In fact, Nassau County did a couple of things really intriguing during that press conference. One was stating how there's no indication that she was well, they didn't say anything like that. They just inferred that she may have worked in a medical office. And they said,
I caught that too. That was bizarre.
Yeah, it wasn't even definitive. That's the one thing that bothered me. And everyone's going, she was a medical assistant in the Army and she's a medical assistant in real life. Like, no, she wasn't a medical assistant. Like, stop the shit already. The one interesting thing with the medical, though, I mean, it's 97. I don't know. One of the earlier theories I had about LISK was that they were somehow also either in the medical field or had an awareness of it. Like Asian Doe had a physical anomaly on they walk with a gait. They were just instances of, people that had medical issues. And that's one of my original theories that I am just, is out the door now, aside from Asa having been a nurse. So, pull out of that what you want, but I don't give much credence to that. The only other thing I thought that I found interesting is that people are running with that she's not a sex worker thing. Well, they never said she was, and they never said she wasn't. There was no indication when she was Peaches that she was a sex worker or that she wasn't. It's all very confounding. The other thing Nassau County did was they went down a path, and I've read it and rewatched the press conference 3 times, and I'm still left scratching my head, is that regarding the bedding found with Tanya, they stated rather clearly that the bedding was from Abraham and Strauss, which was then bought out by Macy's. And there was Abraham and Strauss in Brooklyn, and there was an Abraham and Strauss / Macy's in Massapequa. What about for years, we were saying it was from Linens and Things? Now, they both sold it at the same time, but is Nassau County giving us something pseudo-definitive by saying it wasn't Linen and Things, it was absolutely, A&S, which became Macy's? Because Linens and Things...
And that's the one that has the Massapequa connection,
yeah, but they
right?
both do. Like, Linens and Things had the little triangular-shaped store in Limbrook on Sunrise Highway, but they were also in the Sunrise Mall in Massapequa Park.
Which, of course, we know that's Rex's stomping grounds.
Yeah, so, I've emailed someone for just some more clarity on that, but I probably won't ever get an answer to that. But I'm hoping.
So, with them being buried only last month, obviously, they waited a bit after the identification to make the decision to bury them. Where do you think that comes into play? Was that a decision was made to go public and they were like, well, listen, let's get them buried properly before we make this press conference? Or could this have been a situation where the family was putting pressure on them? Like, all right, well, you identified her. We would like to bury her now. Thank you. And they decided, well, if we bury the 2 of them, it's only a matter of time before someone figures out who the 2 of them are in the public. So I guess we'd better go public. I guess what I'm getting at here is, what, if any, is the family's role in all of this, and why do you think they eventually went public after holding off for 2 years?
So I don't think the family had much leverage, for one, and this is going to sound cruel. I also don't think they had much desire to even know.
There was an estrangement there?
There was. Nassau County said it, that there was an estrangement, even from her own family, quote unquote. But clearly, that incredible little picture of Tatiana is a professional studio shot. And that must have, you get the little 2x3 cuttings and you mail it out to your family. So people had an awareness of Tanya and people had an awareness of Tatiana. And
someone must have kept that. We're going on 29 years now since Tanya vanished.
Yep.
And that photo was not discarded. It appears to be in good shape.
Yeah.
So it also begs the question of, well, if someone kept this memento for all of these years, why wasn't anyone looking for them?
So I want to be very clear on this, and I'll cite my reason for doing so. Although there seems to be an estrangement, we don't know what the family may have tried to do. Look at all the lies told about Jessica Taylor. Her family disowned her. These are lies. Family disowned her. They didn't care about her. They didn't want to talk to her. All of that was the bullshit that was fed to the public for years. It wasn't until Jasmine came out and said, none of this is true. None of this is true, and started to reclaim Jessica's story. So we don't know what any of Tanya's family may have attempted to do. I've scoured all of the available social media pages and archives. There just doesn't seem to be anything there for Peaches, for Tanya. There's no reference whatsoever.
And I looked on social media too. Once we had the name to work with before the announcement was made, I made a point to go, okay, this is the last 20 minutes that I'm going to have to Google these names and look them up on social media without 4,000 results for the press conference. Right. And literally all you could find on Google was just find a grave. And I kind of, I guess, naively expected that, like, I'm going to put this name into Facebook and I'm going to find one of these, like, the forgotten cases or missing and unidentified of New York, you know, a result with that name, you know, Tanya Denise Jackson missing from Brooklyn since 1997, or at least a family post like, yeah, my cousin Tanya's been missing, blah, blah, blah. Nothing. Yep. Zero online presence other than her grave and a true people search page.
Yeah, and I don't understand what it's about. Like, and I'm a nobody, so I don't have a right to know what went on in her life, and she's entitled to her privacy, especially in death. But
oh, of course,
but it's always been unfathomable to me. You know, I work a lot with missing and unidentified people, and I'm just bewildered by no missing person report. If you've attempted to and the cops refuse to take it, then, you know, it's on the cops, and they're fucking idiots half the time anyway. And I get it, but family dynamics. Yeah, I have family members I mean, I don't ever care to talk to or want to know, and I don't need them knowing about me or anything. And I guess so, but if you know, at some point I'm going to go, you know, whatever happened to, like, my cousin, you know, Billy Bob, you know, I'm just coming up with a name. And you might. I'm talking in hypotheticals. It's very frustrating. I don't know how, you know, especially if you know that there's a 2-year-old girl that your family member gave birth to. It's like, I want to know what happened. And it doesn't seem at this time that anybody was doing that. And I hope we learn something different. I'd hate to think that, and this is a statement that could be taken 2 different ways. I'd hate to think that people like me are the only ones that loved and cared about finding out who Peaches and Toddler were, or that people like me are the only ones that will, you know, go on to think about Tanya and Tatiana. Because, I mean, I have a map that's got every unidentified on it, and sometimes I'll put on an unidentified that's a 45-year-old case, and I wonder, hey, am I the only one that's looked at this person's case since it was put on the database? How sad is that? But then I try to go, well, at least I'm one person looking at it. And if I'm one person, then there's sure to be someone else. And, you know, Peaches and Toddler, like any of the others, their legacies are going to be in place in this Gilgo thing because it's sort of, it's so gross, iconic imagery and tattoos. You know, when we learn that they're Tanya and Tatiana, or they're Valerie, or they're Jessica, you know, or when we learn about who Asian Doe is, you know, we can humanize them again and hold on to that. It's everything that happened from the beginning to that is the mess that's in the middle. And, you know, some of these people won't get justice. You know, we may not ever know or see charges for Asian Doe, but we know, I'm going to say it, Rex did it in my opinion, and that's my personal opinion, as he did all of the others. And, you know, I hope the fat fuck fries. So I know he can't, but you never know. Finger in the socket somehow.
Yeah, well, Dahmer got his in jail. Maybe Rex will too.
So did Keyes in his own way, but...
Yeah, true.
Well...
But not before we get all the information.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I agree with Jesse. We talked about it, the lack of leverage and whatnot, and incentive for him to, spill his beans on everything that he's done. You know,
well, that could be only temporary, because if he gets charged with a case in a state that has the death penalty,
touche.
there you go. But I think,
Does Nevada have it?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, it could happen, but I also don't think he cares. You sit on death row for 20 years.
Yeah.
He's not going to be rushed to death.
No.
And within a year of incarceration, I mean, I think that's an early estimate, but within a few years of incarceration, he's going to speak. He wants the trial. This is his last attempt at torturing
BTK style, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, BTK copped right off the bat.
Well, that's true. I mean, it's true. He wanted the attention. I mean, once he saw that it wasn't going his way, he was like, no, I did this. I don't see.
And now he's relishing in that role.
Yes, he is.
The BTK in jail that we see is not.
He's trying to be pen pals with Rex, isn't he? Wasn't there some story about that he was writing Rex letters?
No, he. That's Keith Jesperson, the
smiley face, happy face,
happy face.
Yeah, smiley face is the debunked.
Yeah,
the not real one.
BT,
Crispin Glover.
Yeah, BTK was asked about Rex, and BTK said, "Oh, he's just like me. He's trying to be me." Something to the effect of that. So BTK's
which
narcissism
is all Silence of the Lambs level. Fucking bullshit. This whole and it frustrates me. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I appreciate people like Robert Reldon and of course John Douglas and everybody in the behavioral task force and all that. But at some point you hit a brick wall with that shit, trying to figure out what makes them all tick, because as much as BTK wants you to think like, oh yeah, we can suss each other out, we're all the same. It's like, no, there isn't some psychic link or hive mind between you all. Killers all have a variety of different reasons and MOs and all of this stuff, all this stuff. But most of it comes down to childhood abuse and trauma. Something goes wrong there during a developmental period, usually interlinked with puberty, as we saw with Dahmer. Yeah. And that's about as far as you can take it. But I hate that whole, like even when they were interviewing Bundy, when they were looking for Green River, it was just like, they thought like, oh yeah, we have to go and peer into the eyes of darkness. You have to talk to a killer to catch another one. It's like, listen, that might work in Thomas Harris novels, but at the end of the day, they didn't catch Gary Ridgway because of anything that Bundy told them.
No, but I mean, I will say that there were a couple things that he did say that did apply to Ridgway, which was the revisiting of the
of course
bodies.
he wasn't completely off, but it wasn't something that someone in a cubicle could have guesstimated either.
It's not a complete like medicine, they're always practicing. It's not an exact science. Like every serial killer is different.
Well, that's what I've always been saying. Like everybody tries to apply logic to LISK in the box of logical reality that normal, rational people exist in, and they are outside of that box. They peer in or they jump in or out of that box. They don't exist within those rules. And when you have somebody who, in my opinion, Rex had a fundamental awareness of everyone before him, every single one. And I validate that by the only person he responded back to in a letter was a serial killer in his own right. So like that to me just shows, aside from the John Douglas book in the Huerman house, that Rex had an awareness of Rifkin, how could you not? It was on Long Island. Schulman, Cottingham, all of them. Like he had to have as almost a fundamental knowledge of other serial killers as shit that I know of.
Well, he clearly wanted to be the best one. The guy made a planning document. He turned killing into a spreadsheet. And I think that went beyond, and I know I'm psychoanalyzing here, so take this with a quarry of salt, listeners, but I think that planning document went beyond, I need to make sure I don't get caught. I think he took pride in being the best that he could be at this. It wasn't enough for him that he was getting his rocks off by doing it. He loved that no one was catching him. I mean, that's why you see in his Google search history, he's like looking up podcast. Like, that's the one thing, and like, forgive me if I sound out of line here. That was the one thing that kind of freaked me out with this case for a little bit, was that he was looking up podcasts under the title Long Island Serial Killer Update. And I was on a podcast with that title. So, like, there is a part of me that wonders, it's like, oh, shit, did this guy listen to me going off about him with Michael Whelan on Unresolved? Yeah. It's like, uh-oh. But you get what I'm saying here? It went beyond the normal, I need to cover my tracks so I don't end up in a jail cell. I think this guy was trying to learn as much as possible, like you said, from the Douglas book. Like, where did these people fuck up? And what are people like Douglas looking for? I need to avoid all of that because I'm going to be the one that got away with it. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Oh, you're right. I mean, he had awareness of Stockholm Syndrome, of the painting, and like, he just knew, like, he learned that behavior. So, you know, but I also think that he was, I hate to give him any credit whatsoever, smart enough to change that MO all the time. Like, all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
And, you know, we talked about this prior to him getting caught. It was, well, the MO changed at some point, and I was always under the impression, I was like, he got married or moved into a residence without privacy. And that's when it, you know, I figured he no longer had access to a bathtub or something, not to get too grim here, but a bathtub or something where he could easily dismember his victims and package them up for disposal. You know, I thought that that was the reason there. But, you know, the more that we know about his history, it's like, no, he was married, you know, not just once, but twice. Yeah. Going back to, you know, just out of college, I think he got married. So it wasn't a residential locational issue. It was, like you were saying, it looks like he was changing up his MO to throw the cops off, and he almost succeeded.
Indeed.
Yeah, and I still think we're scratching the surface on this guy. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff that's going to come out after the trial. And like you said, you know, the stuff in Vegas, you know, waiting on obviously a conviction is definitely a smart thing to do, especially since, you know, he's already behind bars. So if they're doing that due diligence behind the scenes right now and they're going to have something that they can drop, I mean, I think this guy has been in operation for a long time.
Oh, 100%.
I think we're going to start seeing some shit in the 80s.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I also have to throw this out there. I made a very embarrassing snafu earlier while talking about the behavioral science unit. Robert Reldon was not the detective investigator's name. That's a serial killer in New Jersey, I believe. I was thinking of Robert Keppel. So, Bob, if you're listening, my apologies.
Oh, that's all right. Things happen in a hour and a half podcast. So I think this is...
Keppel's like, I didn't kill them that way. No, I'm just kidding.
I think this has been very, very informative, though. I mean, I'm just kind of sitting here in awe listening to you two experts on this case. You know, I've just a podcaster that's been following the case since it's kind of been started. I've always thought, and we're not gonna go down this rabbit hole, but I've always thought that there was some connection between the Atlantic City Four and Rex, but
I think most of us did in the beginning. I mean, especially me as a Jersey guy, I was like,
how?
These are too similar. But, and who knows?
Who knows?
Time may tell on that one, but for right now, there's no data coming out that can give us any sort of tipping point.
Yeah, I don't think they're related. Right after the arrest, they restated it in rather certain terms. They're not connected.
I know, and
so they have DNA. That's it. It's just DNA.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's weird.
They just don't have enough of a conviction for the girls in Jersey,
right?
Which is a shame. But that all had some sort of creepy, true grime noir kind of, you know, acclamation. All their heads were facing east toward
they're facing east and all that, and it's like, I don't think these serial killers are bringing compasses out there.
They're like, who's facing east? Like, you're carrying a body and you just, you know,
you drop it where you can because the body is heavy.
I mean, if they're facing the same way, it's probably because he's lefty or righty a certain way and can carry more weight on one arm than the
or
other.
They're trying to hide their head in the brush so they're not immediately, you know, seen by a passerby. Yeah. But was it Dormer who initially thought there may have been a connection, or was Dormer the one that said, we don't think so? Because I remember Dormer talked about it, at least, the Atlantic City
he never... Dormer has basically proven to be a prophet. Like, he has been kind of validated and just about everything.
Well, because it was him versus Spoda on the whole two killers thing, right? He was on our side. Like, no, this is one guy.
Yep. And he was a true cop. He wasn't a fucking corrupted politician. He was a good Irish cop, and it's, him and Verone, but whatever. There was some good initial police work, and everything changed after that. But the wheels of justice grind slow, right?
They do. But thank you.
I'm just glad that they're grinding at all. I hate to sound jaded, but I never thought there was going to be an arrest in this case. I thought that this guy, for lack of a better term, was too good.
Yep, I agree.
It's like after 10 years went by, I was like, if they haven't fucking caught him now, they're never going to.
Agreed.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely that was a day when they made that arrest. So I appreciate everything that you do, Raul. You are a wealth of information, solid and concrete information. Let's be real. And Jesse, of course, you're always an incredible guest, and thank you for arranging this episode, because basically you produced this one.
Well, I wanted to make sure that because at the risk of embarrassing myself here, I knew the surface level information on Tanya and Tatiana, but I didn't want to spend the bulk of the episode, checking my notes. And I figured, like, well, if I'm not checking notes, I'm just going to be texting Raul the whole time. So it's like, let's see, because I remember, Raul, you really weren't comfortable doing podcasts at the time of the arrest, but I think enough of the dust had settled by now where I felt comfortable enough asking you, like, hey, join in and let's make this a round table, because you've done a lot more of the legwork than me, and I know you're going to speak truth to power. So yeah. I'm very glad that the three of us were able to make this happen, and hopefully this is a good resource for the listeners of Who Killed, who are looking for some more information on, an often ignored avenue of the LISK saga. I mean, now we have faces and names for these two victims that go beyond just, a pixelated old photo of a tattoo. Great. Like, it's very important work that is hopefully being done by the powers that be, and hopefully we'll be able to get together again very soon with some new update that comes out. I really hope the trail doesn't end here.
I don't think it will. I think it will continue. I think Asian Male is next, and we'll get some information on that. I don't know when that'll happen, but my fingers are crossed, and my hope springs eternal. And yeah, I only will go on podcasts or YouTube shows or whatever on people that I find ethical and I respect. Otherwise, you just won't see me on, like, Nancy Grace. You just won't ever see me on Nancy Grace. So,
Toddler killer! They killed them! I hate her.
Yeah, I can't.
Top mom.
It just has to be ethical, and at the end of the day, it has to speak to my own soul. And if there's any misalignment there, then I won't participate. But Jesse, you're an incredible advocate in your own right, and you speak a reality that very few have the courage to do, and your voice is always going to be important in this space, and don't ever forget that.
100%
Well,
agree.
I appreciate you. I guess I figured enough people already find me annoying that I might as well burn some more bridges along the way by calling out some of this bullshit, because it needs to be said, whether it's journalists that are fucking up, and luckily we've seen a new leaf turned over with a lot of journalists that are covering this story and others where they're being more sensitive to what was once termed the less dead. We are seeing more respect for not just victims on the whole, but victims who engaged in survival work. And, someone needs to call these fucking cops out. We spent an hour and a half talking about this dick measuring contest between these departments, and it's like, get your fucking egos in check and solve these fucking cases. I'm sorry, enough is enough. Too much time has passed, and while we're busy bickering over these, these claims to bones, for lack of a better term, this guy could have another dozen or more victims that we don't even know about. And I'm not saying that to be sensationalized, but remember, people, when he was arrested, he was only charged with 3 murders. The charges are going to go up to 10 probably by the time everything's all said and done. Who knows what else this guy was capable of. So I'm hoping the dick measuring stops and we get down to finding out what this guy did while he's still alive to get answers from.
100%. Yep. Well, gentlemen, I can't think of a better note to end on other than saying thank you very much for all your time and commitment to finding justice in this case and answers for these families.
And thank you for being a ethical and decent voice out there in the podcast wilderness. And a million thanks for hosting this and giving us the chance to air our grievances and get some factual data out there. I've said it once and I'll say it again. Anytime you want me on, I'm more than happy to come. And I hope this won't be the last time that we see Raul here on Who Killed.
I'd be honored again. Like I said, I'll only jump on a show that I find that I respect and are ethical. And all you have to do is just reach out to me. I'll be ready to go.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I really do appreciate it. And you guys have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you so much to Jesse Pollack for arranging this incredible episode with Raul from Catch LISK. He is the man with the facts and the guy to go to for any information regarding the Gilgo case and Rex Heuermann and the situation surrounding all things Long Island serial killer. So, Jesse, thank you so much. Raul, thank you for battling through your fever and your illness to join us and to spit facts at us and let the audience know what is what, and it is greatly appreciated. So thank you again for joining us, and thank you for listening to this week's episode of Who Killed. I will be back next week with another new episode, and until next time, as always, stay healthy and be safe.
6 months from now, you could be running a 5K, booking that dream trip, or seeing thicker, fuller hair every time you look in the mirror. Through Hers, you can get dermatologist-trusted, clinically proven prescriptions with ingredients that go beyond what over-the-counter products offer. Whether you prefer oral or topical treatments, Hers has you covered. Getting started is simple. Just fill out an intake form online, and a licensed provider will recommend a customized plan just for you. The best part? Everything is 100% online. If prescribed, your treatment ships right to your door. No pharmacy trips, no waiting rooms, and no insurance headaches. Plus, treatments start at just $35 a month. Start your initial free online visit today at forhers.com/talk. That's forhers.com/talk. Compounded products are not FDA approved or verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. See website for full details, restrictions, and important safety information.